God of War is a rare AAA game that meaningfully engages in a dialogue about fatherhood, growth, and toxic masculinity. I don't think it always nails its themes, but I want to applaud it for the earnest attempt to be about something, while radically transforming what the series has always been. It sees a weather-beaten older Kratos who has quenched a lot of his fire and anger in the snow of a remote Norse location. He's trying to put his rage behind him and bury it in the past with the memories of all of the Olympian gods he ruthlessly murdered. And in doing so, he has to do right by the memory of his recently deceased wife and his son Atreus, who's a treasure in his own right. Atreus represents a second chance for Kratos and a chance to raise this boy into a better man than he was. It's a beautiful narrative with some punchy, satisfying combat, an endlessly charismatic villain, and a genuinely moving soundtrack by Bear McCreary to round things out. Like Kratos, God of War found a new identity, and it's better for it. Dragon Ball FighterZ Kali mod the heart out of Marvel Infinite, and as much as I loved that ugly flop, it's hard to not love DBFZ 2. It has the insanity of a versus hyper fighter, with the extra layer of total nonsense you get from it being an anime fighter. And all of this is the gooey, sweet center of a game adapting one of the most beloved shonen anime franchises of all time. It is lovingly referential with all of the dramatic finishes and all of the details. It is so fast and full of the best kind of filth, and man, this art style. Arc System Works' anime aesthetic for their fighters has now hit it out of the park so many times that people are going to start taking it for granted. One of my favorite details is the environmental destruction. Not just when you end a round with a smash and send a character through mountains or do a destructive finish, but even the little things like swatting away ki blasts. You can see them veer off into the background and randomly destroy things in the scenery. Ah, what a game. I don't even like Dragon Ball Z, but I love Dragon Ball FighterZ. So cute, so darling, so precious, so wholesome. I didn't for a second think that Unravel would ever get a sequel, but my heart sang when it was announced because the first one was one of the most beautiful games that I've ever seen, with this creamy, almost macro photorealistic art style. And all of its cuteness belied some fiendish physics puzzles, which were all based around Yarny being made of string and trailing twine behind him. You could wrap it around things so that you could swing, you could toss it up a hill and climb it like you're scaling a sheer cliff, you could tie taut knots to create trampolines or bridges. There was so much that it did. There was so much inventiveness crammed into an adorable package. And now Unravel 2 is here, and it's somehow even more clever, it's more beautiful, and it's even more adorable with the presence of a second Yarny. SoulCalibur has spent some time in the doldrums, and even when SoulCalibur 5 peeked its head out, it wasn't exactly a return to form. But I'm ready to say that I think I like SoulCalibur 6 more than I liked even 2. The game that made me fall in love with SoulCalibur and all of its potential. And a big part of that is that this is the best that SoulCalibur has ever felt, and the pace is finally where it needs to be to allow both rushdown-centric 50-50 heavy characters to shine, and allow for the neutral to flourish. I also think that this might be the best cast that SoulCalibur has had in a very long time. And I'm not just saying that because Killick is back to his old form, with some cool new additions even, instead of just being SoulCalibur's Mokujin like he was in 5. Zasalamel is back, Gro and Aswell are really fun newcomers, and Geralt is the most fitting guest character I think to ever be in a SoulCalibur game. For those nervous about jumping into a 3D fighter, I would highly encourage you to put those fears aside and try this. As far as 3D fighting games go, SoulCalibur has always been relatively newcomer friendly, especially compared to something like Tekken. Give it a go, because 6 is the new jewel in SoulCalibur's crown. As I was playing the Red Strings Club for the first time, I kept tapping out of the game not because it couldn't hold my attention, but because I couldn't contain how excited I was over the conversations that were taking place. And I just had to share snippets of the dialogue, or some of the topics. It's a cyberpunk game set predominantly inside of a stylish, classy, old-fashioned bar. You're an information broker emotionally manipulating people by pouring them just the right cocktail to put them in particular moods and then having a conversation with them. And you get the right information by asking the right questions and the right follow-ups. In one of the conversations, you confront an executive of a tropey big evil mega corporation about a program called Social Psyche Welfare. One person earlier on frames it as a corporation aiming to achieve mind control, whereas this other character goes, "Nah, I'm the head of the project, it's about mental well-being." And the conversation comes down to a debate over corporate ethics, dualism, and mental health, and very specifically whether we even should be attempting to completely eliminate sadness or even anxiety and depression. It comes down to whether or not we are whole without those emotions. Like, is there sweet without sour? Another character poses a hypothetical question: is torture an art form? He argues that animals don't torture each other. It's a human concept and a finely honed craft, hence it is art. There are conversations about ethical advertising, about sex positivity, about imposter syndrome. The Red Strings Club nails so many topics, and it is so thoroughly interesting. This was my first Monster Hunter game, and the first lesson that I learned is that the series sucks at making new players feel at home. I hated how overloaded I was with the information and vomit of UI elements at first. It's a testament to how well honed its core is that I kept playing, and playing, and playing. I now get how people can just sink several hundred hours into each new Monster Hunter game. The extraordinary complexity of all of the crafting and upgrades and the pre-hunt preparation and all of the different weapon types and their extremely specific quirks. All of these elements belie a really simple game where you just choose a big, cool monster that you want to hunt, and then you pursue it and fight it all across the map for like 20 minutes. The combat is extremely heavy feeling and in-depth, and the monsters and the weapons are the stars of the show. Monster Hunter World converted me. I really do want to say more than I love tactical turn-based games. But then do I really need to? Into the Breach is one of the best of those types of games. It's a roguelike, and yet it never feels random, which, given that FTL was Subset's last game, that's kind of miraculous. Information is complete, so you never are in the dark, which allows your strategy, and only your strategy, to matter. I just love how big the turns are as well. You aren't telling one unit to attack and then letting the enemy respond with one of theirs. It's all at once. The enemies move, set all of their intentions, and then you move all of your pieces at once and observe which units will have initiative when it comes time to watch the dominoes fall. The mechs that you're using unlock faster than ships did in FTL, and they're more distinct to boot. And the volume, the sheer quantity of strategies that you can choose from, thanks to the complexity of the mechanics, is my everything. I think the best way to describe why I think Lucas Pope has outdone Papers, Please is to use an example of the types of things that you're doing in Return of the Obra Dinn. So for context, Obra Dinn is a gorgeous game about piecing together the fates of every member aboard a doomed ship. You start with very little information. You have a manifest that includes passenger names, sometimes what they do, and where they are from. You also have a photo of everybody who was on board, and you have a map of the ship, and the freedom to roam about. Mostly everything else you infer from reliving memories frozen in time and poring over the details. Inference, observation, and scouring the ship for clues are the only ways to piece all of the mysteries together, as the game doesn't go out of its way to conceal or show you too much of anything. So in one scene, there are two unidentified women. Checking the manifest reveals that one passenger has the prefix Miss in front of her name, indicating that she's married. Well, if you check the left ring finger of both of the women in the scene, you'll notice that only one of them has a ring. This is one of those key details that allows you to identify who that is. They're the types of observations that you have to make in order to identify all 70 plus passengers and crew members aboard the Obra Dinn. It makes you feel like a real detective untangling a web of mysteries. It is so difficult to define the qualities of a good shoot 'em up. Like art, I know it when I play it, and Zero Ranger is a damn good shmup. I'm not going to spend this whole time talking about things like the elegance of the bullet patterns, even though I kinda could. Instead, I just want to summarize how it makes me feel. And it makes me feel like I never want to put Zero Ranger down. You want to know what pushed this way over the edge and made this one of my favorite games? Not the exquisite bosses, not the fact that it has a way of scaling its difficulty so that you will always overcome whatever challenge is grinding you into the dirt in the moment. No, the moment that made me fall in love with it was when I picked up a power-up at the end of Stage 3 and my fighter jet turned into a mecha complete with a sword. I lost my mind. Zero Ranger is the truth. If you are a shmup fan, you are a Zero Ranger fan. Frostpunk is a cruel, suffocating, stressful game that consistently tests your ability to manage crises. You strain to not only gather the resources to keep your people fed and sheltered from the brutal winds and cold snaps, but to keep them content and hopeful. You are a dictatorial ruler in an apocalyptic winter, and you have to constantly put out metaphorical fires popping up all over a makeshift town fashioned around a furnace that represents survival or doom if you run out of coal to power it. For every action that you take in the name of keeping your people alive, the world reacts, and it makes you constantly second-guess your choices. What I like most is how desperate every single moment feels, and how that tempts you to go down some very dark paths in the laws that you adopt, including going down, potentially, a fully dystopic authoritarian road complete with propaganda centers and detainment camps. What I love are the small victories, raising hope by establishing a church, creating prosthetics for amputees, or escorting stranded survivors back to the safety of your town. Frostpunk is tremendously stressful and gloomy and brutal, but finding hope and victory is all the more satisfying because of it.